20 car innovations that failed to stand the test of time. From self-moving seatbelts to wood-paneled wagons, cars once came packed with features that felt like the future, until they quietly disappeared. Why did these once-beloved innovations fade away? Buckle up as we explore the forgotten features that defined generations but couldn't outrun progress. Bench seats. Bench seats were once a defining feature of American automobiles, especially in the mid-20th century. Unlike today's bucket seats, which are designed for individual comfort, bench seats stretched across the entire front row, allowing for a more social seating arrangement. This design meant that up to 3 people could sit side by side, making them popular for families and even romantic drives, where a passenger could slide closer to the driver. Something that became a cultural hallmark of classic cars in movies and television. However, as car safety and design evolved, bench seats gradually disappeared. Automakers began prioritizing features like contoured support, side bolsters, and integrated headrests, all of which improved comfort and safety. Bucket seats, which became standard, also allowed for the integration of center consoles, cup holders, and additional storage, features that modern drivers have come to expect. Additionally, the rise of automatic transmissions made a front bench less practical, as many cars no longer needed column-mounted gear shifters. Today, bench seats are mostly a relic of the past, found in vintage and classic cars or full-size trucks. While they evoke a deep sense of nostalgia, they simply couldn't keep up with the changing demands of modern vehicle design. Non-powered steering. Before power steering became the norm, drivers had to muscle their way through every turn. Known as manual steering or non-powered steering, this system relied entirely on arm strength. If you were trying to parallel park a big sedan or truck, you'd better have strong shoulders and a good grip. Turning the wheel at low speeds, especially when the car was stationary, could feel like a workout. It was just how things were, from the early 1900s up through the 1970s, particularly in basic models and economy cars. Still, manual steering had its loyal fans. It was incredibly simple, with no hydraulic fluid to leak and no power assist motors to fail. Driving purists appreciated the direct feedback it gave. They felt connected to the road in a way that power steering could sometimes mute. It was raw, responsive, and required a certain level of skill and strength that made you more in tune with the car. But as cars got bigger and more complex, the demand for ease of use took over. Hydraulic power steering became widespread by the mid-20th century, followed later by electric systems that offered precision and efficiency. Vent windows. Once a beloved feature in cars from the 1940s through the 1970s, vent windows, also known as wing windows, were those small, triangular glass panes positioned in front of the main side windows. With a gentle push or twist of the latch, they swung open to let in a cool breeze. It was a simple idea that worked wonders, especially before air conditioning became a standard luxury. On a sweltering summer day, just cracking open those vent windows could bring instant relief. And for smokers, they were a game changer, letting smoke escape without needing to roll down the whole window. But like so many charming features of the past, vent windows slowly faded away. As air conditioning units became more efficient and common in even the most basic models, the practical need for extra ventilation declined. On top of that, auto designers began chasing smoother, more aerodynamic looks, and vent windows, with their visible hinges and frames, interrupted those sleek lines. They were also seen as a weak spot for security, making it easier for thieves to break in. By the time the 80s rolled around, vent windows had all but vanished. Today, they live on only in classic restorations and the memories of a simpler, breezier time. In-car record players. In the 1950s and 1960s, car manufacturers were on a mission to merge cutting-edge luxury with entertainment. And what better way to impress than by installing a full-blown record player inside a car? Yes, you heard that right. Automakers like Chrysler teamed up with RCA to develop in-car record players, aiming to give drivers the same vinyl sound they enjoyed at home. These devices played specially made 7-inch records, promising a deluxe driving soundtrack on the go. But while the idea turned heads, the execution fell flat. Literally. Vinyl records, as music lovers know, need a steady hand and a smooth surface. That's not exactly what most roads offered. Every jolt, turn, or pothole made the needle jump, interrupting the music and frustrating listeners. Engineers tried to fix it with spring-mounted players to reduce vibration, but it was a losing battle. Worse yet, vinyl wasn't built for the fluctuating temperatures inside a car. Records warped, cracked, or simply stopped working. By the time cassette tapes rolled in, with their portability and durability, the in-car turntable was all but obsolete. Ashtrays and cigarette lighters? Back in the day, if you bought a new car, it wasn't a question of if it had an ashtray, it was how many. Ashtrays and cigarette lighters were standard features in nearly every vehicle from the 1940s all the way through the 80s. Smoking wasn't just accepted, it was practically expected. Ashtrays were built right into the dashboard, the doors, and even the back of the front seats for rear passengers. And the built-in lighter? A simple push of a button, and within seconds you had a glowing hot coil, ready to light your cigarette. It was convenience at its finest for a very different time. But things changed. As public awareness of smoking's health dangers grew, so did the pushback against smoking in enclosed spaces, especially cars. Laws were passed banning smoking with children inside, and public opinion turned sharply against the habit. Automakers responded. By the late 90s, ashtrays were phased out and cigarette lighters were no longer standard, only offered by request. Yet the lighter socket didn't vanish, it was reborn. Today, that same port powers your phone charger, your dash cam, your GPS. Which of these classic car features do you miss the most and why? Landau Bars. There was a time when Landau Bars were the ultimate symbol of automotive elegance. Inspired by the classic horse-drawn Landau carriage, these shiny metal bars, usually chrome or polished steel, were mounted on the rear pillars of a car's roof to mimic the look of a folding soft top. Of course, they didn't actually fold or function in any way. Their purpose was purely decorative, meant to evoke a sense of class and tradition that linked automobiles to their aristocratic predecessors. In the 1950s through the 1970s, you'd spot Landau bars on formal sedans, luxury coupes, and especially on the kind of cars that turned heads at country clubs and weddings. They became a hallmark of refinement and eventually a staple of hearses and limousines, adding a touch of dignity and grandeur. For years, having Landau bars was like wearing a tuxedo on wheels. But as automotive tastes shifted towards sleek, minimal designs and futuristic styling, these ornate touches fell out of favor. By the 1990s, they had all but vanished from the mainstream car scene. Trunk-mounted luggage racks. There was a time when trunk-mounted luggage racks were the hallmark of a car ready for the open road. Especially popular in the 1970s and 80s, these sleek metal frames, often polished chrome or lightweight aluminum, were bolted right onto the trunk lid, giving vehicles a sporty, adventurous edge. You'd see them on everything from zippy convertibles to classic station wagons. They weren't just for show either, they served a real purpose, letting you strap down suitcases, duffel bags, or camping gear when interior space ran short. For families heading cross-country or couples packing up for a weekend getaway, these racks made sense. They freed up cabin space and gave cars a custom, travel-ready look. But as time passed, practicality took over. Car interiors got smarter, trunks became roomier, back seats folded down, and suddenly, there was less need to tie your belongings to the outside. There were also downsides. Luggage left out in the open was vulnerable to rain, theft, and high-speed wind. By the 1990s, trunk racks had mostly vanished, replaced by roof racks or enclosed cargo boxes. Car phones. Back in the 1980s and early 90s, nothing said success quite like having a phone in your car. These weren't the pocket-sized smartphones we know today. They were bulky, wired devices permanently mounted inside the vehicle, usually near the center console or armrest. With a chunky handset and a tall external antenna, the car phone looked and felt like something straight out of a futuristic spy movie. If you had one, chances are people noticed and admired. Car phones quickly became the ultimate status symbol. Business executives, high-powered professionals, and celebrities used them not just for convenience, but as a sign that they'd made it. Being able to take a call while driving was revolutionary at the time. It meant you were always connected, long before being online became part of daily life. But like many flashy innovations, car phones didn't last. As mobile phone technology advanced, portable cell phones became smaller, cheaper, and far more versatile. No wires, no permanent installation. Just grab it and go. By the early 2000s, car phones had vanished from showrooms. Today, Bluetooth and voice-activated systems have replaced them entirely. But for a brief, unforgettable moment, car phones were the epitome of high-tech driving luxury. Column-mounted shifters. Once a common sight on American roads, the column-mounted shifter, affectionately nicknamed "three on the tree," was a hallmark of car design from the 1930s through the early 1980s. Positioned right on the steering column, this clever gear-shifting setup let drivers change gears with a quick flick of the wrist, keeping the floor area wide open. That space-saving design was perfect for cars with front bench seats, allowing for a third passenger to comfortably sit up front. A big plus for families and work crews alike. Back in the day, this setup was considered smooth, stylish, and incredibly practical. You'd see it in everything from sedans and pickups to delivery vans. It gave vehicles a clean interior layout and made shifting feel natural and easy. But as car design advanced, the priorities shifted. Literally. Drivers began preferring floor-mounted shifters for their direct feel and sporty edge. Automakers also embraced center consoles packed with tech, cup holders, and infotainment controls, squeezing out the old column design. Automatic transmissions further pushed column shifters out of fashion. By the late 20th century, they were mostly gone from everyday cars. Today, you'll still find them in some work trucks, but for most drivers, three on the tree is just a fond memory of a simpler, more spacious ride. Pop-up headlights. Few features scream retro cool like pop-up headlights. From the 1960s through the 1990s, these hidden gems were the calling card of some of the most iconic sports cars ever made. Sleek by day, dramatic by night, they tucked neatly into the body when off, preserving clean aerodynamic lines. But flip a switch and they'd rise like magic, giving cars an instantly futuristic and aggressive look. Models like the Chevrolet Corvette, Mazda RX-7, and Lamborghini Countach all wore pop-ups with pride, turning heads wherever they went. But beneath the style, there were problems. The motors and hinges that powered the headlight flip often wore out, leaving unlucky owners with one headlight up and one down, the dreaded winking car. And while the design looked cool, it wasn't exactly kind to fuel economy or wind resistance. Even more importantly, changing safety standards began to frown on rigid elements that could cause injury in pedestrian collisions. By the early 2000s, pop-up headlights had vanished from new car designs, replaced by safer, more efficient lighting systems. Do you think cars today have lost their personality compared to vintage models? Tell us what you think. Hood ornaments. There was a time when a car's hood wasn't just metal. It was a canvas for art. Hood ornaments, those gleaming metal sculptures perched proudly at the front of vehicles, were once a signature of style and status. Born in the early 1900s, these pieces originally served a practical role, doubling as radiator caps before closed cooling systems took over. But they quickly evolved into something more, a way for automakers to express identity, luxury, and craftsmanship. Each brand had its own iconic design. Rolls-Royce gave us the graceful Spirit of Ecstasy. Mercedes-Benz topped its hoods with a sleek, three-pointed star, and Cadillac went with ornate crests. These weren't just badges, they were statements. A well-crafted hood ornament said your car wasn't just transportation, it was elegance on wheels. But as time marched on, priorities changed. Safety concerns grew, especially about the risk to pedestrians in collisions. Regulations kicked in, and those proud ornaments were deemed hazardous. Some brands tried retractable versions, but by the 1990s, most were gone. Sleek, aerodynamic lines became the new standard, and the ornaments no longer fit the look or the law. Vinyl roofs. In the 1960s and 70s, if you wanted your car to stand out, a vinyl roof was the way to do it. This design trend took off as a way to give hardtop vehicles the classy look of a convertible, without the complexity or cost of an actual soft top. Covered in textured vinyl and available in a variety of colors and patterns, these roofs became a symbol of style and luxury. They were especially common on high-end sedans and personal coupes, turning ordinary rides into head-turners. But beneath that polished surface, trouble often brewed. Vinyl roofs didn't age gracefully. Sun exposure led to cracking and fading, while rain and humidity could seep underneath, trapping moisture. Over time, many of these stylish additions became rust magnets, eating away at the roof's metal and causing expensive damage. By the 1980s, the vinyl roof's reign was coming to an end. Design tastes moved towards smoother, more aerodynamic profiles, and consumers began prioritizing durability over decoration. Automakers quietly phased them out. Today, vinyl roofs are mostly seen on vintage show cars or lovingly restored classics. They remain a nostalgic nod to a time when automotive design was all about flair, elegance, and standing out in the crowd. Carburetor. For decades, carburetors were the beating heart of the internal combustion engine. From the earliest days of motoring through much of the 20th century, these mechanical devices were responsible for one critical job: mixing the right amount of air and fuel to keep the engine running smoothly. Using vacuum pressure, carburetors pulled gasoline into the airstream, delivering the mixture needed for combustion. It was a tried-and-true system that powered everything from family sedans to muscle cars. But while effective, carburetors had their quirks. They were sensitive to changes in temperature, altitude, and even engine wear. Tuning them wasn't a one-time fix, it was a routine. Drivers and mechanics often found themselves adjusting idle screws, cleaning jets, and fine-tuning fuel mixtures just to keep the car running well. Cold starts could be tricky, and fuel efficiency wasn't always ideal. Enter electronic fuel injection, EFI. In the 1980s and 90s, this game-changing technology began replacing carburetors. Instead of relying on mechanical guesswork, EFI used sensors and computers to precisely control fuel delivery. It adjusted in real time to driving conditions, improving performance, fuel economy, and emissions. By the early 90s, carburetors had become relics of the past, replaced by cleaner, smarter, and more efficient systems. Still, for classic car enthusiasts, nothing quite matches the charm of a finely tuned carb. Whitewall tires. From the 1930s through the 1970s, Whitewall tires weren't just a feature, they were a fashion statement on wheels. With their crisp white sidewalls wrapped around jet black treads, they gave cars an instant air of class. In the early days, these tires were seen on only the most elegant vehicles: Cadillacs, Packards, and Lincoln Continentals, where they signaled wealth, style, and attention to detail. By the 1950s, Whitewalls were everywhere. The wider the stripe, the more luxurious the look. They were the perfect finishing touch on long, chrome-heavy sedans and curvy convertibles. But they weren't just about looks. They also came with a bit of a chore. Those white bands required constant cleaning to keep their bright appearance. A little road grime or brake dust, and suddenly that upscale look needed elbow grease to maintain. As car design shifted in the 1960s and beyond, sportier looks took center stage. Sleek muscle cars and European imports ditched the flashy white walls for more practical, rugged black wall tires or raised white letters. By the 1980s, white walls had almost completely disappeared from modern car lots. Today, you'll mostly see them on restored classics, vintage hot rods, or retro-styled luxury cars. Rear-wheel drive, RWD. For much of the 20th century, rear-wheel drive, commonly known as RWD, was the go-to drivetrain layout for nearly every passenger car on the road. From the classic sedans of the 1940s to the roaring muscle cars of the 60s and 70s, RWD was prized for its balance, strength, and performance. By sending power to the rear wheels, cars enjoyed better weight distribution and handling, making for a more controlled and enjoyable driving experience, especially on dry roads and open highways. It was also the ideal setup for towing, hauling, and high horsepower performance. Luxury vehicles, trucks, and sports cars stuck with rear-wheel drive for its rugged reliability and ability to handle serious power without compromise. It gave drivers the feeling of being pushed forward rather than pulled, which many enthusiasts say offers a more pure connection to the road. But in the 1980s, a shift began. Front-wheel drive, FWD, took over mainstream car design, offering better traction in rain and snow, increased fuel efficiency, and more space inside thanks to the lack of a rear drive shaft. FWD was also cheaper to manufacture, making it a no-brainer for economy cars. Today, RWD remains alive and well in trucks, performance sedans, and sports cars, where power, precision, and driving still reign supreme. Thank you for watching. To continue with more content, comment 1 to let us know you're still following. Automatic seatbelts. Imagine stepping into your car, closing the door, and without touching a thing, your seatbelt zips across your chest. That futuristic idea became a reality in the 1980s with the introduction of automatic seatbelts, a safety feature meant to encourage more drivers and passengers to buckle up. At the time, seatbelt usage was still low, and automakers were under pressure to improve compliance without relying solely on public behavior. So, the belts began to move automatically. These systems typically involved a motorized shoulder belt that slid along a track when the door shut, securing the upper body. But there was a catch. The lap belt still had to be buckled manually, and many people simply didn't bother, mistakenly thinking the automatic belt was enough. That led to a dangerous false sense of security. To make matters worse, the mechanisms weren't always reliable. Some belts got stuck, trapped passengers, or failed to move at all. Worse yet, they weren't compatible with many child safety seats, posing serious risks for families. By the mid-1990s, the shortcomings became too big to ignore. With airbags and modern three-point seatbelts becoming standard, automatic seatbelts quietly disappeared, remembered today as a well-meaning but flawed chapter in automotive safety history. Metal dashboards. In the early days of motoring, metal dashboards were a staple of automotive design. From the 1920s through the 1960s, these solid steel panels weren't just functional, they were a major part of a car's personality. Painted in glossy colors, adorned with chrome trim, or even styled with faux wood grain, metal dashboards gave vehicles a bold, industrial feel. With toggle switches, exposed gauges, and mechanical knobs, the dashboard was as much a statement piece as it was a control center. Built tough and made to last, these dashboards fit right in with the rugged, all-metal bodies of the time. But as sleek as they looked, they came with a serious downside: safety. In the event of a collision, the unforgiving metal surface could turn a minor accident into a major injury. It was essentially a steel wall just inches from the driver and passenger. That realization sparked a design revolution. By the late 1950s, padded dashboards began making their way into cars, using foam, vinyl, and plastic to help absorb impact. Automakers quickly embraced the change as safety regulations tightened. By the 1970s, metal dashboards had all but vanished from new models. Hand crank starters. In the earliest days of driving, starting your car wasn't as easy as turning a key. It was a physical chore. Before electric starters came along, drivers had to rely on hand crank mechanisms to fire up their engines. This meant stepping to the front of the car, inserting a metal crank into the engine, and using sheer arm power to manually rotate the crankshaft. If you did it just right, the engine would catch and roar to life. But if it backfired, the crank could whip backward violently, sometimes breaking wrists or arms in the process. It wasn't just dangerous, it was exhausting. Starting a car required strength, coordination, and often a bit of luck. For many, particularly women and older individuals, this barrier made driving less accessible. That all changed in 1912, when Cadillac introduced the electric self-starter, a game-changing innovation. With the push of a button, drivers could safely and easily start their engines without the risk or the workout. By the 1920s, most automakers had adopted the technology, and hand cranks quickly became outdated, though some cars kept them as a backup. Wire wheel covers. In the 1950s and 60s, nothing dressed up a car quite like a set of wire wheel covers. Shiny, intricate, and unmistakably classy, these covers were designed to give everyday vehicles the upscale look of true wire-spoke wheels, the kind typically found on luxury roadsters and European sports cars. Made from stainless steel or chrome-plated materials, they offered a budget-friendly way for the average car owner to bring a bit of elegance and flair to their ride. Wire wheel covers became wildly popular on American sedans, convertibles, and even muscle cars, giving them a refined, high-end touch. But behind the sparkle, they came with their fair share of headaches. Cleaning them was a chore, and they were notorious for collecting brake dust and road grime. Over time, they could rust, rattle, or loosen, especially after tire changes or bumpy rides. As car design evolved, so did wheel technology. Alloy wheels became the new standard, offering strength, lighter weight, and a modern look with less fuss. By the 1980s, wire wheel covers had mostly rolled off into history. Full-size spare tires. There was a time when every car came equipped with a full-size spare tire, an exact match to the ones already on your vehicle. Whether you were commuting across town or road tripping across the country, knowing you had a reliable replacement in the trunk gave peace of mind. If you hit a nail or blew a tire, you could swap it out with no compromise in performance, handling, or safety. It was just like continuing your drive with all four wheels intact. But as automotive priorities shifted in the late 20th century, full-size spares began to disappear. Automakers were under pressure to reduce vehicle weight and improve fuel efficiency. At the same time, trunk space became more valuable for luggage and groceries. Enter the donut spare, a smaller, lighter, space-saving tire meant to get you to the nearest repair shop and no further. In recent years, many cars have dropped spare tires entirely. Instead, you might find a tire repair kit or run-flat tires that allow limited driving after a puncture. While these solutions save space, they're not always helpful in a serious blowout or remote area. Today, full-size spares still hold their ground in trucks, SUVs, and off-road vehicles, where rugged terrain demands real backup, not just a temporary fix. Woody cars. Few cars embody nostalgic Americana quite like the classic Woody wagon. With their signature wood-paneled exteriors, these vehicles became icons of the 1930s to early 1950s design, rolling reminders of a time when craftsmanship and personality were central to car culture. But the wood wasn't just for looks. In the early years of auto manufacturing, wood was used because it was cheaper and easier to shape than steel, especially for building large, roomy station wagons. Families, travelers, and even upscale buyers were drawn to the spacious interiors and elegant, handcrafted aesthetic of Woodies. They looked like something straight off a postcard, whether parked at a beach or cruising down Route 66. But that beauty came at a cost. Real wood demanded serious upkeep. It could rot, warp, or crack from sun, rain, or time. And in terms of safety, it just didn't hold up to steel in a crash. By the 1950s, the industry moved toward all-metal construction. Simulated wood paneling offered the look without the hassle, but even that eventually faded away by the 90s. Still, the Woody lives on as a cultural icon, celebrated by collectors, surfers, and lovers of a simpler, stylish era of American motoring. Manual wind-up windows. Before power windows became the norm, every car came with a little crank handle on the door, and using it was just part of the driving experience. Manual wind-up windows were standard across nearly all vehicles for much of the 20th century. If you wanted fresh air, you reached over and started cranking. If the backseat passenger needed a breeze, well, someone had to lean back and do the work. It wasn't fancy, but it was simple, reliable, and it almost never broke. These windows didn't rely on wires, motors, or sensors. They were all about mechanical strength and straightforward design. And in an era where fewer electronics meant fewer things that could go wrong, that was a huge plus. You didn't need to worry about a faulty switch or a dead motor. Just roll it up or down and go. But as car buyers began demanding more comfort and convenience, power windows started to take over. By the 1990s, push-button controls became standard, offering ease of use and even safety features like pinch protection and automatic closing. Today, manual windows are practically extinct, showing up only in stripped-down economy cars or utility vehicles. From wire wheels to woody wagons, these forgotten features remind us how far cars have come. Which one do you miss the most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share Past Not Past for more nostalgic journeys down the open road. Thanks for riding along with us.